PTA Council has a mission to empower and support its units and members and promote the purposes and benefits of the PTA, foster membership, develop leadership, and lead advocacy efforts on behalf of all children and families to improve lives and promote excellence in education. The Pleasanton PTA Council has a volunteer group called the Reflections Arts Recognition Program to showcase and recognize student art achievement. Since 1969, over 10 million students across the nation have taken place in this popular PTA program. Art submissions are in the following categories: dance choreography, film production, music composition, literature, photography, and visual arts. The key responsibilities of the PTA Reflections Committee in each school is to play a leadership role and engage students to submit artwork to the program. Volunteers introduce the program to parents, students, teachers, and community members. Once the Reflections Committee receives submission of artwork from students, a panel of judges will judge these artworks based on rules given by the Pleasanton PTA Council, and each school will send 6 entries to the Pleasanton Council. The PTA Reflections Council is having a difficult time coordinating the activities for the program. The shortage of volunteers and design challenges contribute to the overall organizational challenges of the group. Many volunteers have experienced burnout and low morale as a result of role ambiguity, poor division of labor, and lack of a clear and consistent vision statement. The organizational committee believes that the Reflections program truly stands for building school community, not only between students and teachers, but also to families who see their students grow and thrive while they get a feeling of connection working with each other. It is paramount that students receive exposure to a top-notch art program in a public school system. It is also important for public school students to get exposed to a curriculum beyond regular classes. The Reflections program improves the community and culture of Pleasanton. We identified the following design challenges to the PTA Reflections program. Single-person reflections committees. Each school is supposed to have a reflections committee, though we found that is not the case in many schools. In some schools, there is no committee at all, and all of the required work is being done by one person. One of the desired organizational outcomes will be to have a real committee in each school consisting of 6 to 8 volunteers to run the organization. Same volunteer for school level and council event organizing. The same volunteers who help in the artwork coordination in the schools, which is typically about 3 weeks of work, are the same people who are being asked to coordinate the PTA council event. This puts a burden on volunteers. Part of the low morale problem is that work is not evenly distributed among volunteers. Lack of key positions. The council lacks key positions and clear divisional hierarchy. There are no EVPs, which makes the same person responsible for multiple key positions. Untrained volunteers. In regards to volunteer training, 2 or 3 people go for training from the school, and when they return, they train the rest of the members. Since last August, they have only met twice physically. Lack of regular meetings has impacted the coordination between the volunteers. In the words of one of the PTA Reflections organizers we interviewed, they are pretty much new volunteers and they are asked to swim. Finally, there are other competing art school programs in the school. Many schools already have art shows, open houses at the end of each year. For those schools, the Reflections program is not very important. This impacts the participation and synergy of schools with the Reflections programs. Here are the 5 opportunities we see based on these reflection organizational interviews. Low volunteer participation, no long-term membership, finding high-quality volunteers, sharing the workload among volunteers and teachers, and increasing community involvement. Investigation. For our investigation, we interviewed the following 4 people. These people gave us perspectives from different parts and levels of the organization, which helped allow us to form an analysis of the group. Arundhati Mitra. She is currently the Reflections Chair for the PTA Council. Kelly French is the Art and Actions Coordinator at Elisol Elementary School. VG Kalavichurla is the Reflections Chair in Amador High School. And finally, Katie Berner is the PTA President at Valley View Elementary School. For the organizational analysis of the Reflections program, we categorized our findings into 3 functional areas of the organization where we identified issues and potential solutions. Human resource systems. Very little training for new members. After interviewing VG, it was clear that without a centralized training program to lay the groundwork for consistent understanding of the program and its objectives, volunteers were unable to perform to the expectations and to achieve organizational goals. Decentralized training caused a duplication of efforts. Inadequate training materials. This did not allow for the organization to be sensitive to different group needs. It also didn't allow for motivation and buy-in, goal orientation, and created a clear lack of responsiveness. Lack of round-the-year access to training videos. If a volunteer is brought into the organization after training has occurred, they receive no training, since training happens once a year, typically in the first week of June. There is no year-round access for training materials. Poor recruiting methods for new volunteers. Booths are set up before school starts to meet with teachers and potential volunteers and discuss the Reflections program. Emphasis in recruiting is placed on quantity of volunteers rather than quality. Low morale and motivation for volunteers to participate in the program. With a lack of a clear and consistent vision statement throughout the organization and little training, volunteers were quickly losing morale. Lack of role identity and clear responsibility for volunteers. High role ambiguity makes it difficult for volunteers to understand what they are responsible for in contributing to the group. No clear division of workload among volunteers. A consistent theme we saw throughout the interviews was that an unclear division of work makes certain volunteers shoulder most of the work, while others have an unclear view of what they need to do to participate. Lack of adequate reward system for students in participating. VG made the suggestion that schools should give credit for art submissions, and there will be more artwork submitted this way. Lack of adequate reward system for parents for participating. Another volunteer pointed out that structuring a reward system would benefit the group by aligning incentives and group objectives and goals. Political dynamics. Competing interests of the school PTA have risen from supporting both homegrown programs such as Art in Action and council-driven programs such as the Reflections Group. Kelly French pointed out in her interview that competition between different programs has caused resources to be diverted away from the Reflections program. The group could benefit from a collaborative environment rather than the competitive landscape that they are currently in with other programs. Lack of teacher access in high school for students compared to high access of teachers in elementary and middle schools. VG pointed out that there's a political climate in high schools where teachers want less interaction and support from parents than they do in primary schools. As a result, teachers rarely pass along communications about the Reflections program to high school students. This bottlenecks the communication flow of the program that is critical for its success and student participation. Timing for submissions. Timing for submissions is typically in November, and typically many people are very busy during this time. Interviews pointed out that the Reflections group is unable to schedule activities around working parents' work schedules. This creates lack of participation from working mothers that have scheduling conflicts with the volunteer timing. As a result, many of the program's volunteers are currently stay-at-home mothers. Structural analysis. Currently there's a need for co-chairs so that work can be divided between multiple people. A review of the organization structure shows that it is not wide enough to accommodate delegating responsibility. Often volunteers are overloaded with work since there is no one to share responsibility with. Unclear vision statement of goals for the program. Trainings don't include much on the vision statements, and hence co-chairs are not fully aware of them. Having a clear goal to accomplish and vision of the organization allows groups to make choices when confronted with tough decisions. Other programs are more dynamic. Competing programs have the ability to change and as a result recruit potential volunteers away from the Reflections program. Competing volunteer groups do not have the rigid structure in PTA bylaws which allows them to adapt to change and the students' needs. Lack of adequate reward systems for students. Almost all interviews pointed out that rewarding and recognizing people for their participation in the program would increase student submissions. Celebrating students' contributions will help boost morale and participation in the program. Everyone, the co-chairs, does their own marketing. Flyers are prepared, but with their own strategies. With decentralized marketing and communication, volunteer efforts are often duplicated. The synergy of the group is not aligned on communications throughout the community. The effectiveness of the group is hence diminished when it does not operate making marketing as one central group. Opportunities to be seized. Currently we see 4 main bullet points for the Reflections group to seize opportunities to help improve performance. Community building as part of the Reflections program. Leadership development for students and teachers. Training programs that create high-quality volunteers. Arguably most importantly, more students submitting their work and getting recognized for their work. Problem flow. After completing our analysis of the group, we constructed a detailed flow chart to show the underpinnings of organizational problems in the Reflections program. The problem flow chart was useful in identifying end results of problems. It was interesting that some of the volunteers we interviewed were not completely aware of all of the issues in the organization. It was not until we conducted a full analysis of all interviews and reviewed the material that we realized that student submissions and volunteer burnout were the overarching problem themes that were reoccurring throughout the organization. The flowchart moves from left to right, ending in the final 2 problems for the organization. Initially, lack of centralized marketing, inadequate training, and inadequate support feed into the next series of problems faced by the organization. The next 3 columns show the results of these initial challenges. The flowchart is useful in understanding what the group needs to focus on in order to fix the final issues of volunteer burnout and lack of student submission. Recommendations. By centralizing the marketing of the Reflections program, the organization will benefit from streamlining processes and removing the current duplicative work to promote the program. The centralized marketing system will also help communicate a clear and consistent message about the Reflections group to the target market. Training. Training is a large opportunity for improving the Reflections program. The goal of training is to create a clear and concise message as new members are being brought on board to the Reflections program. Although training should not be too large and cumbersome for new members, it should address the major goals of the program, who the people are behind the program and why it's important to volunteer. It should also speak to the organizational structure and articulate the program's vision statement. These materials should be available year-round on YouTube or another public forum to allow for easy access and distribution to new members. Improved group support. We found that leveraging communications is important to the success of the Reflections program. Typically, communications are through email and responses are slow. People often hesitate to email other people on certain topics and are not sure who should be included in communications. We suggest improving the network of the Reflections volunteers by creating social groups such as Y or Google Groups. These will create hubs of support and communication where people can have open forums for questions and discuss emerging topics regarding Reflections.